What's up, y'all? It's Johnny King with another episode of the Johnny King Show, and I'm chilling in my home studio, just chilling on my couch with the man himself, Kyle Matthews. What's up, man?
What's going on?
Thanks for being
Glad
here.
to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation on Zoom when we first met because we have a mutual buddy, or buddies probably here in Denver.
I would imagine. I think the further we get in, we're gonna find more folks who are like, wait,
Yeah.
you know this guy, you know
It's-
this gal.
It is like a big small town
It is.
here in Denver for
It
sure.
is.
But it's just a pleasure to have you join and just hang out and talk shop on
Good to be here.
men's talk on the couch. Why don't you, rather than kind of getting into the whole bio, why don't you fill those in that are watching and listening a little bit more of your background,
Sure.
both professionally and personally, and anything else you want to
Yeah.
I love that. It's a good place to start.
Basically, in a nutshell, if there's a proper way to do something, I've done the opposite, right? I knew that, when it came to work, I wanted to do my own thing, schooling, relationships, you name it, right? I knew from a young age, right?
Mhm.
Like I started my first business when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a few experiences before that. I think I started working when I was 14. That was back when your parents had to sign off on the working papers.
Right.
Hey, we allow our child to work obscene hours, right?
Child labor.
Yeah. And so it was interesting because I didn't really do any team sports for school.
Yeah.
I did the typical soccer and stuff growing up. But not in school. I just dove into work, right? And then ended up, as far as schooling goes, I got into an entrepreneurship program
Mm-hmm.
at Shippensburg, which is a state school back east in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And that was huge. That was like game changer. That was one of the key reasons why my education was worth something. I had a professor, Dr. Shelley Morissette. The guy was the man. He had a few successful startups. He sold the thing. He would pull up his portfolio. I think he had like north of $2 million in his like stock portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
and he would just make fun of the finance guy because his portfolio was better.
Mm-hmm.
Throw stones at HR, right? And I was like, okay, but the guy was brutal.
Yeah.
And so when all my friends were watching movies, playing video games, I was in my room writing business plans. And that was huge because it gave me a certain level of confidence. And then something else that we touched on was obviously the boxing that I got into at the collegiate level, which was a game changer for me. I think, like you and I talked about, there's a certain level as a man that you need to know that you've got what it takes.
Totally.
And at least for me, I think that you never really know until you hit your breaking point. And that for me was huge. So I had a mentor, as I mentioned, that got me into it. And I spent 6 months getting my face beat in. But eventually it clicked. And let me tell you, it's fun because when it clicks, you feel like Neo in the Matrix because you're watching punches come in slow-mo in real time. And it's like, man, okay, game on, right? And no one can take that from you, right? So I graduated in 2008. A lot of my friends were going on, really smart people.
Yeah.
They were going on to grad school, and I'm one of those C's get degrees type of guys, right? So, and my business put me through school doing high-end automotive detailing. I was like, I'm done. I got it. So did an internship, had a whole variety of professional sales gigs. Really interesting internship. Actually, grew up on the east side of Pennsylvania, but on the western side of Pennsylvania, had an internship that had me doing working for a startup, really cool. They were selling sterilant gas monitoring equipment for hospitals. Really fascinating industry. And then I was actually on Fridays, I was going into downtown Pittsburgh, and I was taking seminary classes, which is for me, right? I was like, okay, well, if this is going to be what I'm getting into,
Right.
you know, my folks have their own thing going on. Like, if I'm going to make this for me, right? It wasn't to explore, getting an MDiv or anything like that. I was like, this is for me, right? And I never completed it or anything, but that wasn't the the reason for doing that. It was just more searching, right? And it ended up being fascinating. I won't get into that. I saw some of the best and some of the worst in Christianity in that. But it was good. It was good. I met a lot of awesome people. One of my mentors, still to this day, absolute rock star. Went on, moved out to Denver with my wife, who I met in college. That's a whole nother story. There, well, I guess I'll give a little tidbit.
Yeah.
So I met her. I was a resident assistant for 3 years, and she was my resident. Oops. Yes, I went through the official, approval. I got approval from the RD. She was on the other side of the building. Wasn't my direct, but anyway, it was gray area. But I was like, I knew, right? And yeah, we moved out here, and Denver was our wild, wild west. Got going for a startup and learned a ton. Really got engrossed into the small business community here in Denver. Still have so many rich relationships from that. And then when it looked like that wasn't going to continue on in the way I wanted it to, we started this new experiment where I'm actually working for a couple really incredible founders here in Denver, doing business development for both of them.
Yeah, that's right.
And as any true entrepreneur does, you sit them down in the same room and you come up with an experiment to where you could work for both of them.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. We're in the middle of this experiment,
Cool.
And it's kind of wild, but again, coming back to that theme, it doesn't really fit in the box, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of more of the adventure.
Yeah, so that was a longer route, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a picture of the whirlwind that kind of got me to where we are today.
It's perfect, and I have to catch myself not to keep interrupting you. Well, I want to hear about that. Well, we can get into that now, but very, very cool. And I was an RA as well.
Oh, right on.
My best friends to this day came through. Who were freshmen when I was a junior and senior.
Yeah. And that's a fraternity in itself. It really is.
Yeah. It was fun way to give back, if you will.
Well, honestly, that's the way that I positioned it. For me, I said, okay, I'm gonna connect my residents to as many of the school's resources as I possibly can, and I would give a speech at the beginning of every single semester or year. I said, look, this is college. I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. I'm not looking to get you in trouble. If something happens like that, look in the mirror, because I wasn't looking for you. Your issues fell at my doorstep. And luckily, I didn't have a single issue where the resident didn't come back and apologize and say, you know what, Kyle, that was on me. I understand that you were trying to keep me safe. And I mean, there's some stuff, right? Like, I found a kid face down in a tub with it filling up with water. So some stuff where it's like, whew, I feel like most RAs have seen some stuff, right?
And it's, yes, and there's a fine line I found that I knew these guys. I was just an RA of guys, obviously. So many of them, again, some of my very best friends who had great hearts. I knew their intentions.
Right.
And yet they were finding their way. And if I had brought to the attention every single thing that they were doing, there'd be no students left. No. And to this day, though, now they're amazing fathers, principled men. they've learned through the challenges they had.
Sure.
So it's just interesting. It was an interesting position to be in, you know. So I feel you on that.
How about it?
I feel
Okay.
you. So that's good. Well, take me back though to your first business, 15 years old.
Yep.
Car detailing.
Yep. High-end automotive detailing.
Stumble into all this.
So I ended up getting an in at a local body shop. Actually, the owner, just an awesome entrepreneur. This guy, so far ahead of the curve. He really was. And, you know, I came in and just kind of started at the bottom, right? Learning how to detail cars, right? And I'm talking about like you're the guy, you know, with the vacuum, just going to town, getting covered in like, you know, McDonald's crumbs and you know, what I affectionately call finger juices on the, you know, all the columns and stuff.
Totally.
Right. And man, there's some nasty rides. But I learned so much, and what I ended up doing was learning on a like nowadays all the kids have these really cool random orbital, so that it spins and it rotates. So you're not going to get a lot of heat. You're not going to what's called burn the paint. But old school, it was rotary, right? And so that's how I learned. And so you would actually heat up the paint and correct it. And so like when you're really cranking with the heat, not only like if this is a cross section of a scratch, not only are you clearing that out, but you're actually heating it to the point where, you know, it's doing one of these numbers. So then when you fill that in with a nice wax, like you're actually correcting. So I got to learn that, and then do a whole bunch more, you know, at the body shop, you know, hanging bumpers and doors and all that stuff. But then went out on my own and said, okay, well, like I can do this, right? And I distinctly remember a buddy of mine was like, oh, so you clean cars? Like, no, I have a business and I'm detailing cars, right? And I distinctly remember like, no, like this isn't a hobby, right? Like this is what I'm gonna do to get paid and get where I need to, right? Sweet. And so I built up a crew. At its peak, I had a crew of 5 guys, and we would do high-end vehicles, and then also at the same time we were doing a fleet of HVAC vehicles. I was keeping them maintained, which actually that's a contract that was held for years. Wow. I actually gifted that to one of my best detailers when I went to school. He maintained that for a bit. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. That put you through school.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess 50%. You know, full transparency, probably 50% of school. You know, with the RA gig, and then my parents. You know, for any parents out there, this is brilliant. If you have a child like me, my parents said, "Hey, we're gonna pay for school, but we're gonna pay for your last 2 years of school."
Last 2 years, yeah.
And that really that kept me on the straight and narrow. Yeah.
Tell like what though? How did that incentivize you to? You had to first pay for your first 2 years, right? Yeah. Which allowed you to. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but value of $1.
Well, yeah, value of $1, and you know, it's skin in the game, right? Like I looked down freshman year, and I was, you know, I was on academic probation, and actually, funny story. So I got the notice, and I'm like, oh man, like I got to make some changes, right? So I come home, right? My folks are like, hey, you know, how's it going? I'm like, oh, honestly, like not great, but like I have a plan. Like I know what I'm gonna do, right? And so I come back next semester, and I said 3 things, right? So I'm going to give up girls for a semester, too distracting. I'm going to compete and win in the home show for boxing, and I'm going to read. I was going to get in the Word every day. That's it. Those are my 3 things I'm going to focus on. So I did that. I made Dean's List. I think I was mostly successful in the girl department, and I competed and won in the home show.
Crazy.
At a lean and mean 132.
Wow.
And And so so wild. So I get home, right? I show my folks. And then my mom decides to show me the letter. I didn't know they got a letter. They got a letter saying that I was on academic probation. I'm like, Mom, why didn't you say anything? She said, well, you said you had a plan.
That's cool.
I said, okay.
That was when you were 19, 20? 18, 19?
I was probably 20 because I was always like a year ahead. But yeah.
Good on them for trusting you.
For sure.
I mean, trusting you or trusting the universe. Be like, well, at that point, there's that fine line. You can't keep coddling your children. They've got to be able to learn.
Yes. Yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, they got a lot of credit, for not stepping in and. But they asked. I guess I had the right answer.
Yeah, right. You passed the test. They did ask at least.
There are other tests, not so much, but that one, passed.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And so then, tell a little bit more about your boxing career because that's a cool.
Yeah, it was fun. As I mentioned, a mentor, got me into it.
Yeah.
5th year senior, the guy, who's the guy that did the sword fighting? Killed my father, prepared to die, right? I'm talking Antonio Banderas, right?
Yeah.
The guy looked like Banderas.
Yeah.
Awesome dude.
Yeah.
Whatever you're going through, he was just there for you. Man, what's going on, right? He's like one of those people, and he's like, I got something I think that you'd really enjoy. I'm on the way out. I want to do this, but I'm on the way out. I was like, okay, I'm in.
And this is when?
This would have been my. It would have been my sophomore year. I think it was my first semester sophomore year.
Okay.
I believe.
You weren't playing any other sports?
No, and so I made commitments, and one of the things that I did first was I told all my residents that I was going to be in the show. Because let me tell you something. Once I did that, I didn't miss a workout.
Yeah, you were.
I mean, I was doing like
committed.
4 workouts a day. Between running, doing running and sprints. The actual boxing work, and then sports specific conditioning.
Right.
And I had a couple sub goals, right? I said Rocky 4 abs, definitely, that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, which obviously this isn't healthy to maintain, but I was at a sub 2% body fat,
yeah, that's crazy.
Which you obviously can't stay at. And a lot of guys went on to compete. We had a pretty good program. A lot of guys went on to compete against a lot of the, naval academies. Penn State's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. I think for me, I had what I needed to prove, to myself, to no one else but myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I still enjoy that. Like working out is a big part of who I am, and where I get my confidence. I did a lot of Muay Thai when I moved out. I found a really good crew here in Denver. And it's probably time to get back into it. I would still love to pick up Krav. That's something I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's never going to leave me. I think when I get to that point where maybe old school, doing like Olympic style lifting like I enjoy now, that will probably start to give away to more fighting. Because you see, right, like these old guys that are in their 70s and they still have an amazing, martial arts practice.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, a practice, right?
Yeah.
Like that's yoga, right? Like
right.
If I was going through a rough time, I'd go to my instructor and be like, hey, I need the work tonight. And he would see it in my eyes and he knew. And I would just leave, just sweating buckets. I needed it.
Sounds like you've had a lot of powerful mentors.
For sure.
In your life.
Without a doubt.
Which I think is I don't know, I can only speak for myself. I feel like, maybe you just stumbled into these guys, but I also feel like it must have taken part of your intentionality too. Because I think I just went through life not knowing the power of mentorship.
Sure.
And looking back now, I'm like, man, I was athletic enough, had I had a really good coach, really good mentor, like who said, cut all those other sports out, focus on basketball or baseball or soccer. Just do one. You could have, I don't know. I think that the power of mentorship, especially in those teenage years, is so important that I didn't have that.
Yeah.
Sounds like you certainly did in various areas of business, athletics.
Yeah. Well, and I was lucky enough to get the message and actively seek them out later in life. But I did luck into a lot of them early on.
Great. Yeah.
I even think about a guy that got me into lifting. My health teacher was out on sabbatical having a kiddo, and we got some ex-military guy that came in and started teaching us how to lift, and how super scrawny, and just once I got a hold of that, I was like, oh man, yeah, I'm in. Yeah. I'm into that. I never looked back.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really, really cool. Well, so tell a little bit more, just while we're talking about boxing, what were some of the greater takeaways just of that experience, of that career, if you will, that season of your life that you kind of maybe applied to your business or your relationships?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the intentionality, and of course, obviously, like I mentioned, going public on what you intend to do. You can't keep that stuff, in the closet. Otherwise, where's that accountability? That proper, obviously a lot of baggage around that word, but proper accountability, and I would say motivation. But even the camaraderie, like I remember, getting into it for the conditioning originally. And, like I told you, I lucked out, right? I had a strong jaw. I'm not a bleeder. And so I think we started with like 40 people. And then, by the time fights showed up, it was like a crew of 12. And, they're like, oh, Kyle, you're fighting, right? And I was like, shit, okay, I'm in, and what a group of dudes. And, there's that, I remember we had a Golden Glove dude, called him NyQuil. I was just a beast, and it still is to this day. And he, I remember we were sparring, and I caught a hook from him so hard I could hear my neck go. And I remember I came back in the next day, and I don't know if he was trying to weed me out. Like, I don't know. Like, I should probably, I'm at the point now, I could probably call him up and ask him, or hit him up on Facebook or something. And he does a double take. He's lacing up. He's got the old school lace up the whole way, right? And does the double take. And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, what's going on? Right? And you knew, right? There was an unspoken, okay, you can hang. And that bond, right? Like, when you punch somebody in the face, there's a certain bond there, which I feel like a lot of people don't understand these days. And when you can go and just go to all out war with someone and make them bleed, and then at the end you're hugging each other, right? Like, if you're not a fighter, like if you haven't experienced that you can't bottle that up. You can't put that into words, right? But that experience, to me, it just gives you confidence that, like I said, it's yours. No one can take that from you. Right? And I think that went into the mentality of like, okay, what is there that I can't accomplish, right? What is that, right? I was like the joke, and now I guess I'm old enough where it's like a dad joke, but I was like the one about, what Mr. T says, right? You heard that line? Soup comes in cans, not cans. So I dig it, right?
I love
it. So much to the chagrin of everyone that knows me, but I was always a big one, and I think that rolls into like mindset. And like when people would say that, it would irritate me. Like I was like ruthless in my like this can't word, like what is that? I don't know what that means, right? And I would say it jokingly, but I like seriously, like, what do you mean you what? What does that word mean, right? And I would say it to friends, acquaintances, like, that's not a way to walk through life. Like if you say you can't, you can't. But I'm guessing that's something you decided, right? It's more just how bad you want it. How much pain are you willing to endure to get it? How many distractions are you willing to ruthlessly eliminate so that you have the time to go after what you really want? And it's definitely, I'm not definitely not perfect around that. I definitely am working through figuring out what that is, right? I feel like that's a constant evolving, right?
I gotta imagine there's been certain rewards and certain costs to that type of mentality, right?
Sure.
It is very much like a professional athlete mentality towards athletics, as well as probably business, as well as relationships. What have you noticed that have been kind of the rewards and the costs
Sure.
of that type of mentality in your life?
I think I'll start with the costs, and I think the costs are a lot of people, they don't know how to handle it, and I think that they can be put off like that in connection to my enthusiasm, energy. It can be a lot.
So they don't know how to handle that type of mentality.
Sure, right? Like that extreme ownership was one of my favorite books, right? We talked about that, like bar none, when that came out. That was my business book of the year. And I think a lot of my language, a lot of my analogies were militaristic in nature, right? And so I had to, now actually one of the companies that I work with, Helios, talking a lot about energizers and what are your intrinsic motivators, and in that I've really changed a lot of my language into a little bit more generative, as far as instead of battalions, I'm talking about orchestras, and so I've really had to watch that. I think in the right situations, it can be powerful, and in others it can be too much.
Right.
But as far as opportunities, when you can lead, that's important, right? When folks are looking around, like if there's someone that knows what's going on and they're running the show, great. I'm not going to upset the apple cart. But if it's a situation where folks are looking around, I'll step up and get it done.
I think it is a pretty powerful mentality to be able to switch that on and off.
Right.
Because a lot of times that is a very masculine approach to just blinders on, no distractions, get shit done.
Right.
And whether we're a man or woman, we have that ability to just. But then a lot of times there can be a cost.
Right.
Because what else suffers? Your relationships or your health. Or
right.
Whatever. Right. So how do you finding that balance? I think is a lot of what I feel like I chat with guys about. And I think we talked about before the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. Because you can't just achieve stuff and have your blinders on all your life, thinking that someday then you'll be successful or you'll be respected or you'll be loved, when you're like, man, you got to be those things simultaneously. That's the hard part, to find that right recipe.
Well, and I think one way to land the plane is when I look back, I would, I literally walk through the world, maybe this is like an East Coast mentality, but I literally walk through the world like shoulder forward, like to the point where my chiropractor was like, no, like this isn't like a mind, like literally you are physically doing this, right? And that was my mentality, like whatever it is, there is no, I'm not going to go over it, I'm not going to go around, I'm going through it. That was the mentality, right? And I think that happens with people too. I probably went through people. And I think for me, a big piece was there's actually a really cool group called Luke 10, and they're what I saw in them. I saw a lot of beautiful things, but one of the things was their head trainer walking me through facilitation in a way that I'd never seen before. And I watched as this woman held space for others, and the way that every single person was included, and even if someone needed to be corrected, they still weren't bumped out of the experience. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but I need to learn this. And so it became then, how do I use the masculine energy that I naturally bring to the table to hold space for others, to bring others into the conversation and make sure that their voices are heard.
Cool.
And so that was like a new balance of like, okay, well, yes, I can bring this, and how do I make sure that benefits everyone?
That's pretty sweet.
It was a huge shift.
Huge aha there. Yeah, for sure.
Big time.
Something that comes up to my mind as you're talking about that is I feel like it's awfully difficult to get through one's childhood without having some sort of wound.
Sure.
Childhood wound.
Sure.
You know, and whether it's like, oh, my parents were suffocating, they were so loving, you know, or my parents were not there, you know, the abandonment issues. But so much of those things obviously create our blueprints of who we are as adults. You know?
Right. Whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Can you trace back and connect some of the dots for yourself in terms of, because you have a very successful kind of action-oriented kind of mentality and blueprint with how you run your life, you know, which has allowed you to be so successful, you know. Just curious as to if you've thought of any more to that thought, like the childhood wounding.
Sure.
Really enabled you? Has it been something you've been fighting against? Have you been trying to prove yourself? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two things. I mean, and one of them like actually turned into kind of a double win. So my father was so patient with me, so patient. And the way that he moved through the world, you know, the best way that you can describe it is he had incredible meekness. And when I was a kid, I saw it as weakness. And it wasn't until I was down the road where I understood that when you actually look up the definition of meekness, it's essentially that you have the power, and yet you use restraint.
Like temperance,
Yeah. And so, you know, for me, I think it was part about proving myself and having physical power, and just separating. So like, no, like this is how I'm going to move through the world, right? And so it ended up being beautiful because I got a huge piece of you know, not only confidence, but then also I was able to go back and realize and you know, just reopen my relationship with my father. Not that we ever had a poor relationship, but I was like, I actually went through like a small period of shame because I was like, here I had the improper lenses through which I was viewing my father.
Which were what?
Which was that he was moving through the world,
and he was weak,
at being weak, and it was quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It was just he wasn't showing what the world says, you know, is masculine and is powerful. And looking back, I was like, no, that was the ultimate power. He had the gun the whole time, and he didn't use it. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, a lot of times our societies or our cultures do support the louder, the bravado, you know, the showmanship, the ego as being power. You know, when I forget what I've read recently, like you'd be surprised at how many multi-millionaires are next door to you that you don't even know, because they don't flaunt it, they don't need to. It's like it's not necessarily just about financial success, obviously, as it is about, there's a lot of successful people out there, but they don't have any ego in which to have to show it.
My entrepreneurship professor drove a Honda Accord. The only thing he cared about in life was playing golf. That was it.
That's awesome.
That was it.
Yeah.
You know, even over a relationship. right? He was engaged, and the guy was like, look, it's me or golf. And so he said, I went out to the golf course, and she was gone when I got back. Okay, well, there's something. I mean, there's a larger lesson there, but there's something to be said for knowing, pretty wild.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. But that's cool. The win-win of that.
Yeah.
Childhood wounding.
I would say that, and probably my was that like 7th and 8th grade? I struggled with clinical depression pretty bad. That was rough.
As a result of hormones, or
I have no idea.
Who knows? Just down.
No idea.
Yeah.
And to the point of like actually going in and seeing a shrink, and
suicidal and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Yeah. Were you bullied? Was that a part of it? Were you teased? Were you? Or what was going on at home? Do you have any?
It's interesting. You grew up in a really good household, for sure.
Yeah. My
parents are awesome. Like just to kind of encapsulate that, I always thought my parents were poor. And again, talk about shame moment, right? Like I grew up in a pretty wealthy area of Pennsylvania, and we're talking the school parking lot, full of Beamers and all sorts of nice cars, right? And the parents are driving the latest cars too, and my folks are in like a 20-year-old Honda minivan, and my dad's work vehicle, and then looking back, I found out that they were supporting individuals on every livable continent in the world. And I was like, it completely, it was so overwhelmingly powerful, and yet I felt so small when I learned the extent of it. It's like, oh, that's who they are. And I felt like I felt like it took, like anyone, I feel like it took 10, 20 years longer for me to figure that out than than it should have. But, hindsight's always 20/20.
But I guess that's my question is like, should they, to share those things with you long before you found out, would that have shaped you differently?
I don't know.
If you had known that they were like, hey son, we could be driving these things, but we're choosing to allocate our money towards the betterment of this and this.
I don't know.
I wonder.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a good thing to ponder.
Seems like they were intentional, obviously, in a lot of things they were doing, because they were saying, okay, cool, we got you for the last 2 years of college.
Right, very much so.
It's like it seemed like they were very quiet, but thoughtful leaders or partners.
Well, and saints, because they put up with me. Now I got a little kiddo, and I'm like, oh man, I'm in for it.
Yeah.
I'm in for it. If this little hellion is half of what I put my folks through. But yeah, I think to put a bow on what I went through, I did have a really good group of friends that I felt intentionally ostracized from. And that was hard. That was really hard.
I bet.
And I think a couple things got me out of that. One, I think it's one of the key reasons why my faith is so important to me. Like I had, a moment, I don't know if you want me to get into it, but it's please.
Absolutely.
I felt there was a moment where I can look and actually say that I almost had my vision, not almost, I did have my vision changed. I after 2 years of dealing with this, I remember the exact moment where I felt called outside, and I walked outside and I realized that the sky was bright blue and the grass was vivid green, and the sun was just burning yellow, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been literally living the last 2 years of my life in an actual grayscale. And it was like, powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, it's
and so to me it was like, I'm not going back, right? Like I made a vow to myself that day, like I'm not going back. I'm gonna be that positive guy, and that's it, right? And for the most part, I would say that has happened. But that's a huge piece, and I ended up kind of reinventing myself and saying, okay, well, I have a choice here. What do I want to do? And so I said, okay, I'm gonna be me. Mm-hmm. And I think I had an interesting situation. The fact that later on, towards the end of high school, I did have a pretty good group of friends, but there were nerds I could hang out with, jocks I could hang out with, all the typical groups, right? I was able to have friends, but not that super core group of friends. So now it's like, people from high school that I still like call up and talk to, 2, 3, so I don't know, I think there's a double-edged sword there, but
totally.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Totally. No, I think it's pretty fascinating, and I just like to, in my mind at least, I'm connecting dots too with your story. It's fun to listen to. Looking further from present day, right here, this round, heading towards the future.
Yeah.
You're working with Helios, you said, and then
right. Simple. Yeah.
Tell the listeners just a little bit more what you're doing, entrepreneurially and professionally.
Sure thing. Yeah, wildly different. Helios is working with 1,000 people and up companies doing team building through a tech for good app called Love Work. Really powerful. We're talking the ability to build psychological safety in teams within a matter of months that typically takes years. If you're not familiar with psychological safety, check out the work that Amy Amundsen did with Google, figuring out what makes a top performing team click. And maybe even better, there's an article that Corporate Rebels put out about psychological safety, and there was shown actually what happens when you have a lack of psychological safety, even things like the Challenger disaster, because no one had the safety to raise their hand and say, hey, I know this is bad timing, but if we heat these tiles too quick from freezing, there's a good chance they're going to fail. And no one said it, right? And then they had example after example. So really powerful stuff, and elevated from your typical rewards and recognition system where, hey, congratulations, Johnny, you stuck around for another year. Here's some points to the store. Get yourself a branded backpack and high five, right? So yeah, really cool stuff there. And then Simple, talk about meeting needs. That's commercial janitorial. And I love going around meeting, awesome business owners all across Denver, because you're meeting a real need, right? Yeah. And it keeps folks what they should be doing, focusing on their work and not a clean workspace. And we're diving into tech, making sure that we're closing the loop on communication there, as well as treating people right. The work is hard. Yeah. And so we're making sure that they actually get a fair living wage for that, so that they, perform at a high level. And, I've got a bunch of other programs, just again, I'm an entrepreneur. I can't help myself. I'm always dabbling, launching a podcast here pretty soon. Sweet. Called Owner's Game. So that'll be fun. Yep. We'll have to kick that around. And then if you want to follow my latest adventure, Family Adventure Reviews on Instagram, we're building up a new ride to take all over and hit some epic camping sites. That's awesome. That's big for me, is getting out. I think I mentioned to you, I just sold my sports car and put some money into the truck. So that would be fun.
That's pretty fun, man.
But
it's the time of year too.
It really is. And you got to go further out. I'm sure this isn't a surprise, but all your typical campsites, you got to drive farther out if you really want to get off the grid. Yeah. So I intend on building a ride that
That's awesome.
Subaru
You can do it,
Outbacks can't get to.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
I mean, I was up in northwestern Colorado,
Right.
for 4.5 hours away.
Right.
I'm like, oh, this is where some of the more untouched spots are. I'm like,
Yep.
damn, you gotta go.
Yep. You gotta go.
4 or 5+ hours out of Denver to hit some of those spots.
Yep.
There's a lot of people here.
Well, hopefully we can hit some of those spots. We'll show you. We'll test that pour around there.
Man, that'd be sweet. That'd
Yeah.
be really, really sweet. Kind of wrapping things up. Where do you see your life going in the next 1, 3, 5 years? What are you most excited about that you're kind of working on and
Yeah.
taking your life?
Appreciate that. I think full transparency. I'm figuring that out right now. I got another kiddo on the way to do this fall, and it really does make you rethink. So just a couple things that I'm working through. Number one is profession, right? This has been a great 2-year experiment with these 2 awesome companies. Is that going to continue?
Yeah.
Is there something else?
Yeah.
Number 2 is housing, right? Like, I got a great spot, in the ranch, and do I want to stay there? But is that the community? I think community is the biggest thing that I'm struggling with for my family, right? Like, I know that my wife and I both really want to get a little bit more west, right? Deeper into the foothills, right? And not that that's off the grid by any stretch of the imagination, but is there going to be a place where my kiddo can hop on his bike and go to the neighbors, right? And then do you like the neighbors, right? Like, are the neighbors that, let's say that my income is here, right? But if I move into a community where we're not matched up with other folks that are living similar lifestyles, right? Have I shortchanged, my kids?
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Really struggling with that, right? I mean, we know the real estate market here is insane. Families back east, right? It makes you think, like, shoot, I could take a nice chunk of equity, get a straight up mansion back east, right?
So true.
And then be close to family, right?
Yeah.
But then you're leaving this. What brought us out here
Lifestyle.
in the first place, right? So it's a real struggle. So all that to say, like, those are the things that are currently, I'm asking mentors. I'm asking those questions in quiet time. I'm having those conversations with my wife, with my parents, to a certain extent, right? There's always a healthy amount of that, and there's also, because of course, what are they going to say? Like, oh, exactly, yeah. We don't want to see the little one at all, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta see through the bias there, and I do think that's important. I do think you really need to live your own life. But obviously, family's important. So it's not an either or. It's definitely an and.
100%. Well, I commend you on what I like about your answer. It's authentic because it's like, I don't know exactly, which is sometimes refreshing because I think there's a lot more of us out there who are like, I don't know. Fuck, I don't know where I'm going with this.
Right.
I'm taking it one day at a time.
Yeah.
But secondly, that it's really more focused on the fulfillment piece.
Right.
Because you're not like, oh, I want to grow my business, I want to do this. It was more like family. Because again, with or without your kids and your wife, guys have the ability and well, not just guys, but the masculine brain can oftentimes just focus on providing and success in business, but a lot of times it's a little bit easier to forget about like I said, your health and the health of your relationship, your spiritual health, the health with your kids.
Right.
It's like, but that ultimately is really the legacy that you leave.
Sure.
It's the time you spend or you don't spend with your significant other and your kids, your friends and family. So it's cool that you're focusing on that.
Yeah, well, not only that, but again, I mean, I think a book I've been wrestling with recently, I knew I was going to forget it too. Morgan Snyder wrote a book called Becoming a King. And one of the things that he spoke about, which is really huge, was this question, which again I think is really powerful. You know, we talk about that legacy piece, but I love this question. We think about who's going to be in our wedding or something like that. But what if we ask the question? What if we spent more time with the question? Who's going to carry your casket? Mm. That hit me hard, right? Because when we think about the level of authentic male relationships, to create those bonds is not cheap, right? If you're creating those types of bonds, you're investing, right? To the point where, like, I wish that I had more. I'm working on figuring out what does that look like, right? But I think about a certain buddy of mine right now, right, thousands of miles away, and if he's like, bro, I need you here, I'm getting on the next plane. Right? Like, there's no question, there's no, it's okay, it's I'll cool. Be there, right? But that's not, like, that is costly. And so that's the other piece I'm working on. It's like, what are those bonds that I'm willing to sacrifice and invest? Like, and of course, as an entrepreneur, right, if you're big on the Enneagram, like I'm a 7 off the charts, right? Surprise. That requires, like, I love options. So that requires saying no or just saying yes to a select group, which is challenging, and yet obviously the richness is there, the depth is there, and that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But you're right, a very pertinent question to ask, more about the caskets.
Right.
When it's all said and done.
Right.
Who are going to be those that are honoring you.
Right.
Versus,
Yeah. So hopefully that helps. That question still haunts me to this day, right? There's a few things that are like, I love the quote. I don't even know who said it or who to be attributed to. You can only coast downhill. That's one of those things where it's like every 6 months or so, I'll think of that. But like, whew, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Time to start kicking. Right.
That's so cool. And I think about it too. I've noticed at least every, let's say, roughly like every 18 months.
Okay.
Give or take. I feel like I need to reinvent myself. It's like let go of one trapeze.
Yeah.
Spin blindly while you're spinning the next trapeze, hoping that it's going to be there. There's that desire and that push in life, I feel like, to level up and to reinvent yourself. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying. It's like you check in, we all have our different ways, but just checking in, especially for those of us that would be listening to a podcast like this, is like, it's not just enough to coast through life.
Right. Not if you want something more.
Right. And to feel, and ultimately I think it's to be at the end of our days feeling proud of how we showed up.
Right. With those memories, with those connections and
the impact. Yeah.
And even the present, right? Like that's that was a big thing that was highlighted for me. Yeah. That was like, okay, here's here's why you tend to focus on the future, and here's why you like that contrast. You go back to the past to find reasons and understanding about what's happening, and so you almost skip the present and you go from the past to the future. Yep. And so to actually sit in the present is a practice.
So I just did a week ago at the meditation that I did with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Excellent.
And it's he was saying, when do we ever just sit with ourselves for extended amount of time?
And most people, if they're honest with themselves, they're terrified what they're going to find.
Yeah, and it's been scary. I'll admit to that, but it's worth it.
Oh, sure.
it's scary, but then it's not actually as scary as we think it's going to be.
Right.
So
Especially when you realize, again, we definitely don't have enough time to get into it today, but that conversation of like worth versus value, and once you figure out that you not only can you not make yourself worth more, you also, by contrast, cannot make yourself worth less. You are always valuable.
Yeah.
And once you get to some of that bedrock stuff, then you can start to kind of sort through the mess wherever you are in the proverbial swamp, right?
Yeah, exactly. Amen. Oh man. Well, here's my last question for you.
Yeah, what you got?
Speaking of that book that you read, what would being a king look like for you?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I think that I do know many elements of what that would look like. I'll undergird it by saying, like, here are the values that I have. Like, for me, I break it down to the 5 F's: faith, family, freedom, fitness, and fun. And that's kind of like a big old funnel in that order. And so when I make those decisions, I kind of plop them in there. And if they flow through real clean, great. Like, if they get hung up, then okay, I need to ask a mentor. I need to, check the brakes, all that good stuff, right? And then the purpose is to inspire leaders to live out a better story. And so I think it has to be congruent with that. I think the freedom really is a big piece. I love having the ability to, chart my course even over weeks. Okay, here's how I'm going to structure this, right? And here's a new opportunity I can go after. Having the ability to do that, definitely building that legacy, pouring into my kiddos, being able to do that, not being the dad that, again, you get to the end and you may have all the business friends in the world, but the last thing you want to hear is, a kid saying, yeah, well, that's not the guy I knew.
Right. The guy that I needed.
Yeah. Right. So I think family's a key piece. Again, I'm a huge car guy, right? So definitely want to have the toys, and yet also, what my wife and I came up with. I think this is a key exercise, is doing a lot of this stuff, with the spouse, with the significant other. And what we determined is we want an estate. So we are, we enjoy travel, but I wouldn't say we're good travelers, right? Like, you'll never catch me and my wife throwing on a backpack and hey, we're going to Europe for 2 weeks. Like, it ain't gonna happen, right? Like, everything's gonna get planned out, right? These are the excursions we're doing, blah blah blah, right? Like, the only adventure will be when I get behind a wheel and get lost somewhere, right? So we wanted to be able to go, and then we enjoy travel, but then we wanted to come home, right? And so I have the garage that has things that are fast and loud and go bang, and she has the garage that's full of flightless birds, 3-legged dogs, one-eyed cats, all that kind of stuff, right? But on top of that it would be a place where people could show up wherever they were at, that it would be a house of shalom, a house of peace, for friends, family, whatever it might be. And that we could invite them in. There'd be tons of space for sharing those rich conversations, those conversations that matter, that just cut through the crap and get to the real meat of what's going on. I think that's it. That's, if I could have these types of conversations and get paid for that, that count me in. Right. So maybe that's what I need to do, right? Maybe we discovered 100%. It here. But that's the Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, well, it sounds like it's part of being king for you is intentionally building the kingdom, which is that estate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having that place that will then allow me to more properly use my resources to help others forward. Right? Yeah. Not only by inspiration, by holding my life to a certain level as far as leading it that way, and having people that are going to call me on my stories if I'm not living according to my values, right? But then I would also be able to be a flow through, like a lot of people that help me get where I'm at. Yeah. Whether that be, financially or, big thing for me was wisdom, right? Like that search for wisdom, and when you really ascertain like what it is that's important, some really fun things start to happen in your life. Yeah. And not that you can ever hold it for it, right? It's elusive. You're always after it.
That's pretty cool. So I love that. But we could keep chatting.
We could. We already cracked the hour mark, and we're barely scratching the surface.
For the sake of time, we'll wrap it up. This will be part one of many parts to come.
Fair enough.
I appreciate you being here, man. Thank
you for
be
here.
Dropping some truth and wisdom bombs on the listeners and the viewers, on myself. Yeah, man, so good. Just love the intentionality of how you go about your life and how things are shaping up, and also the authenticity of saying, I'm intentional and I like to plan, but at the same time, I don't have all my stuff figured out just yet.
Yeah. Don't feel bad about it, right? Like that's, you get to create and dig into it, and that's the beauty. If you don't like where you're at, you can change it. Yeah.
No doubt.
I'm convinced about that.
Absolutely. Well, if people want to connect with you offline here, or I should say online, but off this podcast, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, honestly, I would say the best place is probably LinkedIn, just because that kind of connects to the variety of businesses, and I'm definitely my main distraction, and I'll call it a distraction because it is, right? Is definitely Instagram. So if you wanna get down on all the crazy adventures, at Family Adventure Reviews, track me down there. But otherwise, probably LinkedIn is best.
Beautiful. Yeah. Kyle Matthews. Awesome, man. Thank you for hanging.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Tons of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for listening. Hope you got some major notes out of that one. Until we meet for the next podcast episode. Thanks for joining me. Cheers.